The rain on New Kyoto 9 never fell condensed. The city exhaled heat from its reactor lungs, sighed up mist from 1,000 ramen pots and algae vats, and then let it cling to everything like a second skin. Neon did the rest, dripping down in kanji and corporate sigils, turning the night into a smear of advertisements and low-orbit reflections. I'd been walking the dockside promenade, killing time until a broker named Sato texted me about a shipment that was supposed to be untagged and uncomplicated, which meant tagged and a nightmare. I was 3 days out of work, 1 day out of excuses, and half a bottle into the kind of cheap whiskey that tastes like melted traffic pylons. That's when I saw her. She stood beneath a flickering streetlight scabbed with old notices. The light fought the fog and lost, then rallied, then lost again, painting her in Stutter's violet. Shadow, violet, shadow. Even in the stammers of neon I could tell she wasn't local. Her skin had a soft luminescent underglow, like the belly of a jellyfish, and her hair carried fine particles that caught the light and held it a heartbeat longer than they should have. Two silver eyes tracked the crowd not with panic, but with calculation. The kind you see in pilots during a hull breach. What's salvageable? What's not? What will kill me if I grab it? A child by human metrics. 14, maybe. 15 if the universe had been unkind and taught her to wear that expression. Earlier than it should, she clutched a satchel patched with adhesives from a dozen Port Sovereign B. Hadrian's ring, Vesper Dock. The bag bulged. Not with cloth softness, but with small hard shapes that tapped each other. When she shifted her weight, she'd chosen a smart spot. The forkware dockside split one path toward the tourist sim arcades, the other toward the cargo lifts and people like me who might actually have a reason to carry cash. "Take my toys, human," she said to a passing merchant. "Please, I need money to buy medicine for my mother." The merchant didn't even slow down. A drone hawking jellyfish kebabs bumped her shoulder with a mind your path chirp and buzzed off. She tried again with a street artist who had taught his robot dog to paint. The dog barked a refusal in a bright tone. The artist didn't look up. There are 1,000 tragedies on New Kyoto 9 every minute, each with its own soundtrack of apologies and excuses. You learn to triage with your eye and keep moving. But I'm a salvager, which means I have a weakness, interesting shapes in broken places. I drifted closer. She noticed me from 10 steps out, tracked, evaluated, decided I might be a buyer. Her shoulders squared. For a beat, I saw the child vanish and the engineer appear. "Toys?" I said when I reached the circle of her bad luck light. "Open the bag." She hesitated. It was quick, a blink, but any hesitation is a map to something worth stealing. I softened my voice. "I'm not patrol. You smell like solvents and burned capacitors," she said, nose wrinkling. "You're either a mechanic or bad at hiding your crimes. Why not both?" I said, and found myself smiling. She unlaced the satchel and folded it open like a flower. Inside lay machines the size of knuckles and thumbnails, gleaming with a finish that wasn't exactly metal. Too smooth for printed alloys, too uniform for artisan work. One looked like a flattened beetle with 6 magnetized feet. Another was a sphere with a seam so perfect it seemed like a trick of light. There were curling strips like black ferns, stacked coins whose edges were etched in fractal teeth, a needle with no eye that hummed faintly as if remembering music. Not toys. Field gear. Prototype grade. The kind of things governments pretend not to own, and pirates pretend they didn't find in the most obvious places. "What's your name?" I asked, though I already knew I'd remember her as the girl with the satchel until the day I died. "Lyra," she said. "From Illyrian." I'd heard of Illyrian the way you hear of a chef you can't afford. Whispers, reverence, rumors. Illyrians tuned materials the way humans tune instruments. Ships refitted by Illyrian hands burned less fuel and made less noise doing it. Their engineers spoke to atoms like they were cousins. I picked up the flattened beetle. It flexed against my finger like a living thing, then relaxed when it tasted the oils on my skin. "Surface crawler," I murmured, remembering a spec sheet I'd once sold to a buyer from the Sable Syndicate. "Adaptive adhesion, microleg articulation. The shell is." "Not shell. What is this made from?" "Layered van der Waals lattices with protein-bound bonds." She said it like she was reciting yesterday's lunch. "It'll climb anything that isn't actively rejecting it. You can't get this through customs." I said, Not through the front door. No one asked customs, she said. Her eyes were steady, which made the tremor in her hands stand out like a radio tower on a flat plane. Why sell it as a toy? Because if I call it what it is, people with guns will come take it, she said. If I call it a toy, people with shoes keep walking. She'd made a grim calculation and walked it to its endpoint. I knew the math. I'd done versions of it on quieter nights. I turned the crawler over. It purred someplace beyond hearing. How much for this one? I asked. 200 credits, she said. There was a bravado to the number. Either she was guessing at human greed or she was terrible at it. It's worth 100 times that, I said. I didn't say it to teach her. I said it because the price was an insult to the object. She flinched, misreading my tone. Fine, 100. Please. My mother needs. Stop, I said, and kept my voice calm. 200 is your price. I'll pay it, and I'll pay more for answers. Her jaw worked. She hated that. Not the money, the dependency. I get it. The world feels like a tunnel and every outstretched hand looks like a hook. I transferred the credits. She watched the chip brighten, then dim as it swallowed the transaction. She tucked it into the smallest pocket, the one sewn flat against the inside of the satchel. Not her first credit, possibly her last. Tell me how you ended up here, I said. In an alley? She said, chin lifting. In a city that eats people, I said. With a bag full of miracles, a gust pushed a curtain of steam from the ramen stall across the walk. It ghosted around us and drifted toward the channel where barges of salt glass and polymer or slipped beneath the promenade like slow sharks. A transit ad hummed to life on the underside of the next skyway. Helix Corp Care, you can count on. I felt my back teeth grind at the slogan, but said nothing. She closed the satchel. For a second she just stood with her hands on the fabric, as if calming the machines inside by touch. My mother is sick, she said finally. We have a word in my language, Zathis. It means fog that sits in the bone. It takes breath first, then small strengths you didn't know were strengths, like swallowing and singing. Then the big ones, like standing up. There's a treatment. It costs more than most planets, and Illyrian can't cover it. I said, surprised. Your people invented things money hasn't learned how to name yet. Her smile was tiny and sharp. Engineers aren't in charge of budgets. Human. Asterisk, she wasn't wrong. How'd you get here? Freighter from the ring station at Athos, she said. I repaired a cracked cryo feed with a nutrient tube and a heat sink from a food printer. Captain gave me passage and strict directions. Stay quiet, stay out of the way, keep my bag close. You left a sick mother to come sell. I almost said toys, then stopped before I insulted her work. Devices in a city you don't know. She told me to go, Lyra said, and some part of her voice thinned to wire. She said, Illyrian made you a pair of hands and a brain. Go find someone who will pay what they're worth, she said. Don't trade your name for pity. So I didn't tell the captain mine until we docked. She trusts you, I said. She believes I can make a thing better by touching it, Lyra said. Sometimes belief is heavier than hunger. She looked past me then, and I thought she was watching the flow of foot traffic for a safe escape. But she was tracking security drones, tiny dots of matte black skimming along the ductwork like stingrays. I recognized the brand Kyobashi patrol units, cheap, invasive, looking for illegal firmware signatures or anything that reacted like contraband when pinged. Your bag, I started, is shielded, she said, too quickly. Mostly, that meant not enough. A teenage courier on a monowheel snapped past and nicked her shoulder. She staggered, and the satchel banged against the light pole. The bag sang, a bright harmonic ping like a dropped goblet. The closest drone beeped as if it had heard an interesting joke. I made a call I didn't have time to think about. Choice first, ethics later. I stepped into Lyra's space, angling my body to block the drone's line of sight, and slung one arm around her like a drunk friend. There you are, I said loudly, slurring the words. I've been looking all over for you. Come on, the shuttle's leaving. Her eyes snapped to mine, confusion, then calculation, then a flicker of trust. She leaned into me like we'd rehearsed it and let me steer her into the crowd, toward the alley that wedged between a karaoke bar and a data launderer with pink glass doors. We turned the corner. The alley was narrow enough to make us intimate with the trash. A grease sluice ran down the middle. The buildings held hands overhead. Farther in, a side door opened and a burst of laughter spilled out synthetic high notes. All pre-programmed delight. The sign above the door read Everyday Orchid. Lyra sagged against the damp wall and pulled her satchel closer. "Thank you," she said, but made it clear she wasn't going to owe me more than those 2 syllables. "Don't melt your gratitude," I said, and scanned the alley mouth. The drone drifted past like a curious fish and kept going. "For now, those are illegal outside the corporate zones," she said. "To use them here, someone paid a bribe." "Everyone pays bribes," I said. "The question is who can afford better ones." I slid down the wall to a crouch and set the flattened beetle on my knee. The crawler woke, flexed, sprouted 6 legs, and took a few testing steps, their tips hardly touching. Lyra watched despite herself, pride leaking past fear. "She taught you?" I asked. "Your mother?" "She taught me to listen to materials," Lyra said. "Not just what they are, but what they want." At my raised eyebrow, she added, "Everything has a low-noise channel. If you stop talking long enough, you can hear it." I thought about the years I'd spent elbows deep in broken scrubbers and hull patches, the way a heat sink vibrates when the thermal mass finds equilibrium, the way a cracked manifold sighs before it fails. I knew what she meant. I just never had words for it that sounded so gentle. "If you can build this," I said, tapping the crawler, "you can do better than standing under bad lighting and begging strangers for medicine money." She bristled. "I wasn't begging. I was offering value to a market that refuses to see it." "Fair correction," I said. "But the market here buys fear first, and it is very good at detecting more value than it can politely afford." "You talk like a person who sells things you don't want other people to admit they need," she said. "I talk like a person who's tired," I said. "But yes." The door to the Everyday Orchid banged open. A pair of men drifted out, dressed in the uniform of the quietly dangerous dark coats that hid too much, and shoes that never got wet. Their laughter was still pre-programmed, but the eyes were not. One saw Lyra, saw the satchel, and performed the kind of math that got people disappeared. "We should move," I said. "We should disappear," she said. "Lucky for you," I said. "Standing, I'm very good at that." I led her deeper into the alley, then through a kink where a maintenance corridor punched through to the arcade level. We emerged into a nonsense of lights and sound air hockey pucks spitting sparks, Fresnel domes projecting fake oceans, kids with haptic gloves swatting at ghosts only they could see. The smell was sugar and ionized dust and the panic of coins running out. "Keep your head down," I said. "Act like you're here to beat the high score on Meteor Shepherd." "What's a Meteor Shepherd?" she asked. "That one," I said, pointing to a farm sim where a holographic shepherd chased flaming rocks, away from a herd of polygonal llamas. "That game is badly optimized," she said. "Their collision mesh is lazy, and yet the line to play is 20 people long," I said. "Welcome to commerce." We drifted through the arcade and came out near a line of grub stall squid skewers, vat-grown pork buns, a place selling something called nostalgia noodles, which were just noodles that tasted like noodles you ate when you were less poor. I bought 2 buns, handed her one, and pretended not to see the way her fingers shook before she hit it by taking a bite so committed. It became its own courage. "What's your plan?" I asked around a mouthful. "My plan was sell, then buy, then fly," she said. "But selling is slower than the disease, so you came to a place that speeds up everything." I licked sauce from my thumb. "What do you need, exactly?" "Quantities, not just credits." Her eyes narrowed at my tone. She heard the logistics in it. "Il cure 9, she said. 3 vials is a full course. 5 to be safe. It's stored cold and decays fast when warm. Transport is tricky if you don't have certified units." "Who sells it?" I asked, though I'd already seen the sign humming under the skyway. I wanted to hear her say it. "Helix Corp," she said. The name tasted like rust when she spat it out. "They refused to take our currency. They said if I brought them or patents we could talk." "You have patents in your bag," I said, nodding at the satchel. "I have promises," she countered. "If I sell them outright, I can't iterate. My work on the crawler is half the work. The other half is what I'll do when I see it fail." "You're not selling," I said slowly. "You're seeking a licensing partner. On dockside." with a bag that pings security drone's favorite frequency. She lifted her chin. You asked my plan. I couldn't help it. I barked a laugh, quick and delighted. A couple at the next stall looked over, decided we weren't contagious, and looked away. Okay. I said, okay, new plan. You don't stand under lights anymore. You don't let the toys sing in public. You stop using the word toy unless we need to hide something from someone. With too little imagination, she said, don't make me say it again. It makes me sound noble, I said. I'm Kellen. I know a few buyers who will either pay what this is worth or try to kill us for it. Either way, we won't be bored. She studied me like a circuit she'd just pulled from a dead machine. Why? Because I'd like to stop losing to people who put slogans on the underside of skyways. I said, because someone once handed me a tool when I needed it and didn't charge me until I could pay. Because I nodded at the satchel. I like shiny things that solve problems I hate. And what will you take? She asked. There it was again, the insistence on naming the hook before we test its barb. A cut, I said. Smaller if we live, bigger if we almost die. Fair? I don't know what fair means on this planet, she said. It means we both get to feel slightly cheated, I said. But alive. A chime sounded from the ceiling. Transit notice. Orbital Freight 22 Alpha departing in 20 minutes. The sound made something in my spine wake up. Sato, the broker. The untagged shipment I was supposed to look at. I felt the tug of old obligations, of debts with interest measured in knees. I looked at Lyra. She looked at the ceiling. The first time you trust a stranger, the real math happens in your face muscles, not your head. Come on, I said. The broker can wait to lie to me. You and I have to find you a safe room and a freezer with a conscience. Those are rare, she said. So are girls with satchels full of miracles, I said. We cut back through the arcade, past the kids yelling at ghosts and the llamas ignoring meteors, and out onto a quieter service deck where the air tasted less like sugar and more like salted circuits. I pinged a favor to a woman named Hoya who ran a night clinic for people who couldn't afford to admit they were sick. She also kept a cooler that didn't ask questions. Hoya owed me 1, or I owed her 3, and I'd pretend arithmetic works like that when you smile. We reached the lift. It rattled like bones in a copper cup as it dropped. Lyra stood very still, both hands on the satchel's webbing, eyes on the floor numbers as if she could make them change faster by will alone. You ever flown? I asked. Not with you, she said. Let's try walking first, I said. We're going to steal from Helix Corp, aren't we? She asked, to casual, like she wanted to watch me flinch. Chapter 2, I said. The lift groaned to a stop. When the doors opened, the air hit us cold and clean. The way air gets when someone who cares put a filter in recently. Somewhere far below, a barge horn sounded. Somewhere above, the stars hid behind cloud and light, and the kind of money that buys you the license to sell people their own breath back to them. Stay close, I said. She nodded. The silver in her eyes caught the corridor lights and turned it into a promise I didn't yet deserve. We stepped into the dark together, and the city's hum pitched up half a note, as if it could sense a new circuit closing. The room Hoya gave us was barely a room, more of a maintenance closet that someone had bullied into pretending to be a safe house. It had one narrow cot bolted to the wall, a sink that coughed more than it poured, and a flickering holo strip that tried and failed to simulate daylight or still. To someone like Lyra who'd been sleeping under streetlights and exhaust vents, it was a palace. She sat on the edge of the cot with her satchel cradled in her lap like a sacred relic. I leaned against the wall, watching her fingers trace the scuffed fabric. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence was comfortable in a way that only shared desperation can be. Finally, I broke it. Start from the beginning, I said. No more riddles. No more Toy Stories. Tell me everything. Lyra's eyes flicked up to mine, wary but resolute. Then she took a deep breath and began. A planet of light Illyrian isn't like Earth, she said softly, and there was a distant, almost musical quality to her voice. It's not carved from dirt and water. It's a planet born from crystal seas and living storms. Our ancestors didn't farm soil, they grew lattices. We built our cities into the roots of the sky itself. She shifted on the cot, searching for words that a human could understand. Everything we create is alive. Our machines learn as they grow. Our homes shift shape as families expand. Even our ships, she paused, eyes unfocused, as if seeing something far away, are not built. They are grown from starseed matrices. They bond with their pilots. They become part of us. I tried to picture it, starships with beating hearts, cities that breathe. I'd heard rumors of such things from deep space explorers, but to hear it described by someone who lived it made the universe feel suddenly larger. It sounds like paradise, I said. It was, she whispered, until the blight. 2. Zathis, the bone-Foglira's hands clenched tighter around the satchel. It started as a cough, she continued. A dry, harmless thing. Then people grew weaker. They couldn't stand, couldn't eat. They began to fade. We called it Zathis the bone fog because it moves silently and suffocates slowly. By the time we understood it was a nanopathogen, it had already spread across half the system. I whistled softly. A nanoplague. She nodded. A self-replicating one, designed to target Illyrian biology. It bonds with our crystalline blood cells and rewrites them. Our healers tried everything biotech, molecular resonance, quantum flushes, but nothing worked. And then, her voice broke. For a moment she couldn't go on. I gave her the space to gather herself. Then Helix Corp arrived. 3. The offer, they came to our world as partners, she said bitterly. Claimed they had a Curilcure-9 developed in one of their black research labs. They demonstrated it on a dying child. He stood within a day. It was real. Let me guess, I muttered. They didn't give it away, no, Lyra spat. They sold it. At a price no ordinary family could pay. And they refused our credits. They demanded rare minerals, patented technology, military contracts. They turned a cure into a weapon of control. Her silver eyes burned with something old and furious. My father led a delegation to negotiate. He offered them 1,000 quantum cores, enough to power their fleets for decades. They laughed. He offered them starseed designs, medical nanots, anything they wanted. They still refused. A week later, he was found dead. The council called it an accident. But you don't believe that. I know it wasn't. Her voice was a razor now. My father opposed Helix Corp. He believed we could build our own cure. They silenced him. And with him gone, resistance crumbled. She looked down at the floor. Now my mother is sick. The blight is in her blood. And we cannot afford the medicine. 4. The flighty folded my arms and exhaled slowly. So you decided to leave. She nodded. I took what I could, designs, prototypes, my tools. I stowed away on a freight hauler bound for the inner colonies. I thought if I sold my inventions, I could earn enough to buy a dose before it was too late. And those machines you carry are fragments of bigger dreams, she said. That crawler you bought, it's part of a self-repairing swarm. The sphere, a quantum relay that could make faster-than-light communication obsolete. The needle, she hesitated, is a medical nanite injector. If I had the resources, I could replicate Ilcure-9 myself. But I don't. I stared at her in silence. This girl, this starving, desperate child, was sitting on technology worth more than most nations. And yet here she was, begging on a dirty street for medicine money. You're not just an engineer, I said finally. You're a genius. Her cheeks flushed faintly. I'm just doing what I was taught. No, I said firmly. You're doing what no one else dares. The choice in the dark silence that followed was heavy and complicated. I watched her as she carefully packed the devices back into the satchel, one by one, like a priest handling sacred relics. She moved with precision and purpose, every motion deliberate, every clasp tightened just so. You could sell these to the military, I said quietly, to black market syndicates, to the Union Council. You'd be rich enough to buy every vial of Ilcure-9 on Earth. And what would they do with them? She shot back. Turn them into weapons. Use them to kill instead of heal. My father warned me our creations must not be twisted into tools of greed. I sighed. You're fighting a war you can't win alone. Maybe, she admitted. But I won't let them own my work. Not Helix Corp. Not anyone. Her resolve hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd met rebels, pirates, and revolutionaries, but none of them had the kind of fire this girl carried. It wasn't anger or vengeance. It was something pure and unshakable, refusal to let cruelty win. And I realized, in that moment, that I was in deeper than I'd planned. I wasn't just helping a stranger anymore. I was stepping into a battle far larger than either of us. Vi. The dealie straightened up and walked to the door. All right, I said. I believe you. And I believe you can do this. But we're going to need a plan. A plan? She asked warily. Yes, I said. You want to save your mother? Then stop thinking like a desperate girl on the run. Think like an engineer, like a strategist. If Helix Corp has the cure, we're not going to beg them for it. We're going to take it. Lyra blinked. Take it, how? I grinned. I have contacts people who hate Helix Corp more than they hate the law. Smugglers, hackers, ex-military. If we can find out where they're storing the cure, we can steal it. Or, better yet, steal their research and manufacture it ourselves. She stared at me as if weighing my soul. Why would you help me? I shrugged. Because I've spent most of my life stealing junk to pay off debts. Maybe it's time I stole something that matters. Lyra looked down at her satchel, then back at me. And for the first time since I'd met her, she smiled a small, fragile smile, but real. All right, Kellen, she said. Let's steal a cure. 7. A new alliance. Later that night, long after Lyra had fallen asleep on the cot, I stood by the window, staring out over New Kyoto 9's sprawling skyline. The rain-slick streets glowed beneath 1,000 neon signs. Somewhere up there, orbiting silently above Earth, Helix Corp's orbital distribution station floated stuffed with the medicine that could save a dying woman. I thought about the girl in the other room, about the brilliance she carried in her bones, about the way her voice trembled when she spoke of her mother, and I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that my life had just changed course. I'd been drifting for years, smuggling, salvaging, hustling, but now I had a mission. Not for money, not for revenge, for something far more dangerous. For hope. And somewhere, deep in the sleeping city, a plan began to take shape, one that would pit us against one of the most powerful corporations in the galaxy. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, the stars outside the window seemed a little brighter, and tomorrow, they would burn. New Kyoto 9 had never looked smaller than it did from the cargo bay of a stolen hauler, drifting in synchronous orbit. Through the viewport, the megacity glowed like a circuit board, veins of neon threading through the darkness, while above it, far above it, Helix Corp's orbital station hung like a crown of light and arrogance. It was called Helix Prime, 8 kilometers across, 3 concentric rings, a central spire shaped like a double helix twisting into the void. From here, Helix distributed everything: medical nanots, engineered crops, atmospheric stabilizers, and, of course, Ilcure-9. They also stored their secrets here, including the formula for the cure Lyra's mother desperately needed. We had one chance to get it. The plan. Run it again, I said, tapping the schematic projected in midair. Lyra sighed, but didn't protest. Over the last 3 weeks, we'd gone over the plan more times than I could count. It wasn't perfect, plans never were, but it was the closest thing to possible we'd come up with. Phase 1, infiltration, she recited, pointing at the outer ring of the schematic. We used the hauler's transponder codes to dock with the maintenance sector of Helix Prime. They'll scan the ship for contraband, but the false manifest you stole from your contact should pass. Borrowed, I corrected. Stolen, she said flatly. Phase 2, entry. Once inside, we split. You head for the security hub on level Gamma 2 to disable surveillance nodes and spoof our biosignatures into the employee database. Meanwhile, I head for research sector Epsilon 4 to locate the Ilcure-9 repository. Good so far, I said. Phase 3, acquisition, she continued, a determined glint in her silver eyes. I'll breach the nanovault using the molecular key I built. Once the vault opens, I'll copy the formula to a portable data prism and secure at least 3 vials of the cure. And Phase 4? I prompted. She hesitated. Extraction, meaning? She bit her lip. Meaning we get out before Helix security floods the station. I grinned. Now that's the fun part. 2. Infiltration. Hauler lurched as we approached Helix Prime. Automated docking systems seized control, guiding us toward the maintenance bay with the precision of a surgeon. My palms were slick with sweat despite the sub-zero temperature in the cargo hold. Still time to back out, I muttered. Lyra didn't even glance up from the control panel she was rewiring. Still time to stop breathing, she said. Doesn't mean I will. The docking clamps locked into place with a deep thunk. A moment later, the ship's hatch hissed open. Two Helix security officers were waiting. Their armor was sleek and angular, matte black with silver Helix insignias. One held a scanner, the other a pulse rifle set to stun. State your cargo and purpose. The taller one barked, waste recyclables from the new Kyoto orbital ring. I lied smoothly. Manifests in the system. The scanner beeped as it verified the data ship. After a tense 10 seconds, the officer nodded. You're cleared. You've got 30 minutes to unload. We were in 3. The maze of Metal Helix Prime's maintenance sector was a labyrinth of catwalks, conduits, and sealed bulkheads. The air smelled faintly of ozone and sterilized metal. Automated drones zipped overhead, welding, scanning, repairing. No one gave us a second glance. Security hub is that way, I whispered, pointing down a narrow service corridor. Research labs are 3 levels up. Lyra's face was pale but determined. See you on the other side. Stay in contact, I said, handing her a comm bead. If anything goes wrong, it won't, she interrupted. But I could see the fear behind her bravado. We split up. Ghost and the Wiresi made my way toward Gamma 2, blending in with a group of maintenance techs. My stolen ID badge passed 2 automated scans and 1 bored human guard. When I reached the security hub, I ducked into a maintenance shaft and popped the panel with a multi-tool. The hub was a fortress 3 layers of biometric locks, a rotating encryption firewall, and an AI overseer named KAL-9 that monitored everything from personnel movement to heartbeat irregularities. Good thing I'd brought a distraction. I uploaded a malware package I'd acquired from a hacker named Sori on the Blacknet. It mimicked a critical coolant leak in the reactor coolant grid enough to trigger a full diagnostic override. Alarms wailed. KAL-9 diverted processing power to the crisis, dropping its firewall to minimum levels. Hello. Beautiful, I murmured as I jacked into the terminal. Within minutes, I'd looped the surveillance feeds, inserted fake employee profiles for Lyra and me, and set a 30-minute blind spot in the station's motion detection grid. Security's yours, I whispered into the comm. Move, V into the Lion's Den copy, came Lyra's reply, slightly breathless. She was deep in Epsilon for now, and every second counted. The research sector was pristine and silent, the floors polished to a mirror shine, the walls lined with stasis pods containing experimental biotech. Lyra's heart hammered in her chest as she slipped past 2 patrolling guards and into the nanovault chamber. The door was a masterpiece of paranoia 10 meters tall, sealed with triple quantum locks and a molecular encryption field. Most thieves would call it impossible. Lyra wasn't most thieves. She knelt beside the panel and removed a device from her satchel. It looked like a glass spider, its limbs tipped with adaptive nanoprobes. As she activated it, the probes crawled into the key port and began mapping the encryption lattice. Come on, she whispered. The first lock clicked open, then the second, then the third. With a low hiss, the vault door parted. Vi. The heart of the beast chamber beyond was colder than space. Racks of cryogenic pods stretched into the distance, each labeled with a string of numbers and molecular codes. In the center of the room, suspended in a field of blue light, floated a crystalline cylinder, the Ilcure 9 master sample. Lyra's breath caught. She approached reverently, fingers trembling as she removed a portable data prism from her satchel. Copying formula now, she whispered. Progress bars filled her vision. 10%, 24%, 57%. Then dash an alarm. Unauthorized access detected, boomed a voice overhead. Security en route. Damn it, Lyra hissed. Kellen, we've got a problem. I see it, I said, already sprinting toward Epsilon 4. Get what you can and move. She yanked the prism free at 78% completion and snatched 3 vials of Ilcure 9 from a nearby rack. As she turned, the chamber doors slammed open and half a dozen Helix troopers poured in. Rifles raised. Drop the samples, barked the lead officer. Lyra raised her hands slowly. Then she smiled. Sorry, she said. I have a better idea. 7. The toys fight back with a flick of her wrist. Lyra released a cloud of microdrones from her satchel. They swarmed the chamber like a storm of silver dust. hacking into the troopers' armor interfaces and triggering electromagnetic bursts. Weapons shorted out. Visors went dark. Chaos erupted. Lyra sprinted for the exit, ducking behind containment tanks and overturned consoles. One trooper managed to grab her arm, but a microdrone latched onto his gauntlet and delivered a shock that dropped him to his knees. "Kellen, I'm on the move," she shouted into the comm. "Copy. Security hub's compromised. I'm heading to the extraction point. Meet me at docking bay 7. 8. The chase. What followed was pure chaos. Sirens blared. Bulkheads slammed shut. Automated turrets unfolded from the ceiling and rained stun bolts down the corridors. Lyra dodged and weaved through the station's arteries, her satchel clutched to her chest. I intercepted two guards with a stolen pulse rifle and dragged her into a maintenance tunnel. Just before a blast door sealed us in. "Nice timing," she gasped. "Not my first heist," I said. Grinning, we crawled through the tunnels for what felt like hours, the station's alert status climbing from level 2 to level 4. Finally, we emerged near docking bay 7 only to find a squad of Helix Marines guarding our escape route. "Suggestions?" I asked. Lyra's eyes flicked to the satchel. "1." She pulled out a device no bigger than a coin and tossed it onto the deck. A second later, the corridor filled with a burst of electromagnetic interference. Alarms glitched. Weapons malfunctioned. The Marines staggered. We didn't wait around. We ran. IX. Extraction or stolen hauler roared to life as we slammed the hatch shut behind us. Alarms echoed across the docking bay. Tractor beams locked onto the hull, but Lyra was faster. She jammed the docking clamps with an override signal, and the ship lurched free. "Hold on," I shouted as the engine screamed, that we shot out of the hangar and into the blackness of space, twisting and rolling to avoid the storm of plasma fire erupting behind us. Helix interceptors launched from nearby bays, but our ship was small and nimble, and I knew every dirty trick in the book. "Shields at 20%. Lyra yelled over the noise. "Then let's make it quick." I punched the thrusters. The hauler bucked like a wild animal as we dove into the debris field. Orbiting just beyond Helix Prime, the interceptors followed, then peeled off. Unwilling to risk a collision, we were free, victory, and a shadow. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just sat in the cockpit, gasping for breath, adrenaline still coursing through our veins. 78%, Lyra said finally, staring at the data prism. "It's not the complete formula, but it's enough. I can finish it." I nodded. "And the vials?" She held them up, her hands shaking. 3 doses, enough to save my mother." I smiled. Then we did it. But as the stars stretched out before us and Helix Prime faded into the distance, I couldn't shake a single thought from my mind. They would come for us. The stars look different after you've stolen something the universe swore you couldn't touch. Sharper, maybe. Hungrier. As if the cosmos itself was holding its breath to see what you'd do next. For 3 days, Lyra and I drifted through the dark between worlds in a stolen hauler that smelled of coolant leaks and ozone. We slept in shifts, traded watch duty, and rewired every subsystem twice to stay off Helix Corp's radar. Every proximity ping made us tense. Every unknown ship signature made my finger twitch toward the thruster controls. But on the 4th day, the nav computer chimed softly. "Illyrian orbit approach vector confirmed. We were going home." I returned to a dying world. The first thing I noticed as we dropped into orbit was the light. Illyrian wasn't a planet so much as a jewel, a swirl of violet oceans and crystalline continents that shimmered like stained glass. Under a binary sunrise dot, but beneath the beauty, I saw scars. Orbital platforms that had once been vibrant hubs now floated dark and lifeless. Cities glowed faintly in patterns that looked more like containment zones than celebrations. Even from orbit, I could see the haze, the dull, sickly gray that clung to the planet's atmosphere. "The blight," Lyra whispered from the co-pilot seat. Her silver eyes glistened as she stared at her homeworld for the first time in 2 years. "It's worse than I remembered." "Then it's a good thing we brought hope with us," I said. She didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on a continent-sized spire rising from the planet's surface, Aurelia, the Illyrian capital and her home. 2. The House of Shadows landing clearance was a problem. Helix Corp's blockade ring refused us entry at first, and it took every forged document, encrypted signature, and bribe in my arsenal to get through planetary customs. Even then, we landed in the outskirts, miles from the capital, under a false ship registry and a name that wasn't mine. Lyra insisted we travel on foot the last stretch. We don't want attention, she explained, and I want to see my world again, properly. So we walked. ILY Ryan was breathtaking and heartbreaking all at once. Great living structures, homes grown from luminous crystal and woven biofiber arched toward the sky, like frozen lightning. Roads hummed with faint electromagnetic pulses, alive beneath our feet. But everywhere we went, there were signs of decay. Closed clinics, silent factories, public plazas now filled with makeshift infirmaries. People moved slowly. Faces were pale, eyes sunken. The blight was everywhere. At last, we reached the heart of Aurelia, towering spire of living glass that Lyra called the House of Shadows. It was her family home, though now it looked like a tomb. The gardens were wilted. The great wind harps that once sang in the breeze were silent, and inside, lying in a cradle of crystalline vines, was her mother. III. The last breath was a ghost of the woman Lyra had described to me. Skin dim where it should have glowed, breath shallow and irregular. A fine gray mist seemed to cling to her like frost, the telltale sign of Zathis working its slow, cruel magic. Mother. Lyra's voice broke as she knelt by the bedside. I'm here, I did it. I brought the cure. The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then locking onto her daughter's face with infinite tenderness. Lyra, you came back. I promised I would, she whispered. Her hands shook as she prepared the vial's 3 slim cylinders of liquid light. The nanits shimmered as they warmed, hungry for a host. I watched silently as she injected the first dose into her mother's arm, the liquid vanishing beneath translucent skin. And then, we waited. For hours, nothing changed. Illyrian medicine worked slowly, weaving itself into the body at a molecular level. I watched the two of them in silence, Lyra holding her mother's hand, her lips moving in prayers to Old for translation. Then, just as the first rays of dawn filtered through the crystalline windows, something shifted. The mist thinned. The woman's breath steadied. Her skin glowed faintly again, light pulsing gently beneath the surface like a heartbeat. She's stabilizing, Lyra whispered, tears streaming down her face. It's working. I turned away, giving them a moment I had no right to witness. This wasn't about me. It never had been. IV. The price of defiance stayed hidden in Aurelia for several days while Lyra's mother regained her strength. But the universe doesn't let thieves rest for long. It started with whispers, rumors of strange ships in orbit, of Helix agents in the capital asking questions. Then came the broadcasts to the individuals responsible for the theft of proprietary Helix Corp property. Surrender yourselves and return all stolen assets immediately. Failure to comply will result in planetary sanctions and military action. It was Director Voss himself speaking, his voice oily and controlled. Helix Corp knew we were here. We should run, I said one night as we checked the perimeter sensors. Get off-world before they tighten the noose. No, Lyra said firmly. Running won't stop them. If they take the cure back, everything we did was for nothing. Then what's the alternative? We can't fight them. She turned to me, eyes blazing with a resolve I hadn't seen since the night we met. Maybe not alone, but what if we share what we stole? Veet fire in the networked idea was insane, dangerous, possibly suicidal. It was also brilliant. The incomplete formula for Ilkir 9 sat inside the data prism, locked behind a dozen layers of Helix encryption. But Lyra was better than their engineers. Within 48 hours, she had decrypted, reconstructed, and finished the cure. Then, using a network of rebel engineers, dissident scientists, and underground data couriers, she did the unthinkable. She uploaded the cure to the galactic web, every colony, every research lab, every pirate signal relay and darknet node. Within hours, copies of the formula spread across the spiral arm faster than Helix could contain them. Within days, manufacturing facilities from the outer belt to the Vasari frontier were producing Ilcure 9. Independently, Helix can't sell what everyone can make, Lyra said as we watched the network light up with download confirmations. They don't own this anymore. I couldn't help but laugh. You didn't just save your mother. You started a revolution. Maybe, she said quietly. But revolutions start with hope. And hope starts with one person refusing to sell their soul, VI. The reckoning Helixcorps' response was swift and brutal. They sent warships to blockade Illyrian, threatened trade embargoes, and even launched a covert strike against the capital's data infrastructure. But it was too late. The genie was out of the bottle. Independent governments condemned Helix's monopoly. Trade unions boycotted their products. Even rival megacorps seized the opportunity to flood the market with competing medicines. For the first time in decades, Helixcorp was losing. And at the center of the storm was a girl with silver eyes and a satchel full of miracles. Voss made one final attempt. He transmitted a message directly to us. No threats this time, just an offer. Join us, he said. We can give you resources, protection, a place among the brightest minds in the galaxy. Think of what you could build, Lyra. Think of what we could build together. She didn't even hesitate. I don't build weapons for tyrants, she replied. And I don't fix systems that should burn. 7. A new dawn months passed. The blight began to fade from Illyrian. Clinics reopened. Children played in the streets again. Lyra's mother walked among them, frail but alive, her laughter ringing like wind chimes through the crystalline courtyards. As for us, well, life changed. I turned down a dozen lucrative jobs and took one that didn't pay at all, teaching orbital mechanics to Illyrian apprentices. Lyra, meanwhile, became something far bigger than an engineer. She became a symbol, a beacon for anyone who'd ever been crushed beneath corporate greed and refused to stay down. One evening, as we stood on a balcony overlooking Aurelia's glowing skyline, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me for weeks. Do you regret it? I said, any of it? The danger, the theft, the target now painted on our backs? She thought about it for a long time before answering. No, she said at last, because I learned something important. What's that? She smiled soft, tired, but unstoppable. That sometimes the smallest thing's a toy, a tool. An idea can be worth more than gold if you use it to save someone you love. Pate. Epilogue. The Starburn Promise. Years later, people would tell stories about what we did. They'd call it the Helix Uprising or the Cure Rebellion. Historians would debate whether we were heroes or criminals. Helix would brand us thieves. The oppressed would call us liberators. But to me, the story was much simpler. It was about a girl who sold toys on a rainy street to save her mother. About a desperate act of kindness that grew into a movement. About how hope, once lit, can burn brighter than any star. And every time I saw the children of Illyrian playing with the little, crawling machines Lyra now freely shared with the world machines, born from the same designs she once clutched in fear, I remembered the words that started it all. Take my toys, human. I need money to buy medicine for my mother. Only now, those toys weren't for sale. They were gifts, blueprints for a future no one could monopolize, no one could hoard. And somewhere, deep in the night sky, the stars didn't seem so far away anymore.